So big ideas don't scale on inspiration alone. They scale on systems. The most effective work happens when strategy and systems are inseparable. But what do I mean by that? And what am I referring to when I talk about systems thinking? Well, let's start with some definitions. So Meadows states that a system comprises of 3 essential components: elements, interconnections, and a function or purpose. Elements are the individual parts, interconnections are how these parts interact, and the function is a system's overall goal. This means a system is a unified entity where the relationships between its parts and their collective aim are fundamental to its definition. So systems are defined as interconnected sets of components working together to achieve a very specific outcome. And they can be found in various forms, from natural ecosystems to human-made technological infrastructures. And Carson underscores this interconnectedness of all living beings in the natural world. We need to consider this ripple effects and unintended consequences of our actions within systems. While design systems provide a structured approach to visual and interactive consistency, the concept of systems thinking extends far beyond just design systems. It's about applying those kind of principles to every facet of product development and organization function. This encompasses how teams collaborate, how decisions are made, and how data flows and how products evolve. So instead of siloed functions, systems thinking promotes that interconnectedness. And for instance, consider a product launch. You have an engineering system which ensures code quality, deployment efficiency, and scalability. You have the marketing systems which define campaign workflows and targeting audience and performance tracking. And then you have the customer support systems, which are going to be standardizing the issue resolution, doing feedback collection, knowledge-based management. And then perhaps you have also as well maybe operations, which are optimizing allocation, project management, and cross-functional communication. All of these come together and connect. By viewing these as an integrated system, organizations can identify bottlenecks, anticipate challenges, and create resilient, adaptive processes. A change in one system component, though, will inevitably ripple through others. This broader application of product systems thinking moves beyond those aesthetics to impact the fundamental how of a company's operations, leading to more predictable outcomes, efficient workflows, and ultimately, the goal of everything when you're going to apply it to a company, greater success. But let's get to the core, though, of what this concept is, because at its smallest level, systems thinking involves assigning a process to something. That's pretty much all it is. But at its largest, it can encompass an extensive framework or application. And I'm sure we've all heard of lots of different frameworks. Systems are applied to repetitive actions to ease. That's what they're trying to do. Systems are documented, which in turn empowers through that easing. So systems thinking is a way of understanding the world, as I've said, not as these isolated parts, but as these series of interconnected wholes. And instead of breaking these down into these smallest components, it looks at this emphasis of how these all interconnect and the behaviors when that happens. And it encourages us to identify the relationships, the feedback loops, and the boundaries that define a system, and to understand its purpose or its function. So what I'm going to do kind of first here is consider why systems matter for humans and how that dependence might not always be perhaps the best thing. Because systems are reliable and they give us dependencies. They give us things we can rely on and they give us things that we can count on. This allows us to have foundations that we can build on. And that seems like it's going to be a good thing, right? But that can also be a problem. We can become too dependent on them, and we can fail to question their reliability. A system should be supportive, not an unknown requirement or just something that's done just because. And I'm sure we've all been in companies that things are just done because, and no one's sure why we're actually doing them. Often, when systems are not reviewed and iterated, they become bloated, they become burdened, they lose touch with the problems they were designed to address. So this quote to me highlights the reciprocal relationship between the tools and our thinking. Our mental models and the tools we influence with each other shape our perspectives and actions within systems. Systems work for humans by providing reliability and foundations upon which we can build. They also offer dependability, allowing us to anticipate outcomes and establish consistent patterns. The predictability reduces cognitive load and allows us to focus on those higher level tasks and that kind of creative problem solving. But however, as I've noted, if we rely too heavily on those systems without that critical evaluation, that can be problematic. It kind of makes us dumb. Effective systems are those that work with human nature, that recognize us being human, that are designed for our cognitive limits, our emotional triggers, and learning preferences rather than fighting against them. And we have cognitive limits, we have emotional triggers, and we have learning preferences that are remarkably consistent across cultures. If you don't design for these psychological realities, you end up fighting human nature instead of working with it. Because big ideas, they don't scale on inspiration alone, they scale on systems. And today I want to share how treating systems thinking as your core strategic tool can transform not just your work, but entire ecosystems. I want to look a little bit at how systems thinking can be that tool, and often, because it's linked to design discipline, how we can move beyond that single discipline. Take those definitions and use that same component thinking into other areas. Most companies have some systems, as I've identified, and I've also, if we're honest, a lot of them don't work. Often they need surfacing, they need documenting, and they need identifying why we are still using them and should we even be using them. I also today want to explore the myth of friction around inspiration and systems. Whilst inspiration sparks those often initial ideas, they are delivered through systems. Because humans, and this is the reality, thrive within well-designed constraints. Think about any improvisation. It's actually not chaos. There's going to be boundaries to any improvisation, be it music, be it performance. It's a systematic freedom within clear structures. The same principle applies to product and operational design. It's a common misconception that system stifles creativity. We're not creative in chaos. We're creative when we're safe enough to experiment. And systems provide that psychological safety by making the boundaries clear and failure modes predictable. So in WordPress, this is how the block system enables more creativity than ever before with block themes and patterns, combining elements from a base collection with a styling constraint. Cognitive load theory also shows, rather simplistically but true, that too many options can be an issue. Progressive disclosure reveals this complexity as exploration happens, and this can be used to great success. People need predictable patterns to build with confidence. This is all called choice architecture. There's actually a name for this because humans work this way. Creating systems involves not just organizing features, but organizing the decision-making process. So let's move to think in practical terms. How can and could a system be created? What systems are created typically using this type of thinking? And how do we take all these ideas and start applying systems thinking? Before kind of even getting to that answer, it's essential to start thinking, quite frankly, about being practical, shipping, and creating. Because all too often, systems are designed, well, in theory, without considering their practical application. And it's all well and good to have a resilient design system in theory, it's fantastic to have a system AI could, in theory, use components from, but don't spend months creating only to then test and find issues. Be practical from the start. You need to set goals and take time to think. Talent gets you started, but systematic thinking gets you everywhere else. When you're affecting lots of users, you can't rely on instinct. You need systems that are constantly produce excellent outcomes. To rely and share the burden. This is true of an open source system like WordPress, an enterprise agency, or a product, and this is true of AI, and it's true of humans. Now, if I was to write this talk a few years ago, it would have been very, very different. Probably even a few months ago, it would be very, very different as well. The systems today are far more reliant on AI being part of them, and generally it's just kind of put on top, right? Although often that's more workflows, if we're honest, and applied to these broken systems anyway. When creating any system, being aware of both the space you are making and everything available to you is key. System thinking should take full advantage of the space. For example, when creating a design system, you need to consider whether you need to start from scratch or if an open source system could be used to your advantage. Is there something that gets you a significant part of the way that you could adapt? So if we need action, the counter to that is planning. How do you work out what the system has to be before taking that action? It's also important to note, even more so now, it's tempting to build. It feels like the time, right? The time to build, the time to do things. There's an energy in the air. But balance is going to be the key. So, to start thinking about that plan, I'm going to share a framework, as all good talks need. I'm kind of doing it as a little bit of a joke there, but it's a way of me proposing to start a conversation. And that framework, I'm just doing the letters of scale. I'm not claiming that we call it this, but it's a way to start that talk. Often when the issue lies is that frameworks and theories around systems thinking were developed in a far different era than the one we have today. So we need to think a little bit differently with what we know. AI, the way that we work, the technologies, the people we are, that wasn't of yesterday. And the space that we move in wasn't there either. But we don't dismiss the theory. Everything we know about humans is still valid, and everything we know about the way that systems work is still valid. We build on that, and we learn from that. So, S is for structure, C is for community, A is for adaptive, L is for layer, and E is for enable. This is a framework for creating and iterating an existing system, for applying the thinking I have been talking about to something from a project or to a process, and it should be adaptable to both. This might be a full-scale operation change or a smaller modification. Being consistent and considerate in your approach, methodical for even the microsystem scales up. So structure comes first and foremost. The biggest mistake I see teams make is designing the interface before designing the system. And if you actually think about that sentence, it makes no sense, but we do it all the time. It's kind of like, and forgive me this, decorating a house before building the foundation, which is incredibly tempting, but doomed. Structure first. Define what the decisions need to happen. Then you can style second. And once the structure, you can build up that style. And then you can have the systematic outcome. Finally, you can have that result, having had that foundation from that really robust structure. The more precise your systematic structure, the better all the tools we have now, such as AI, and curiously humans, function in it. Systems aren't just technical, they are social, and this is where community comes in. The most elegant code in the world fails if it doesn't account for how humans work together. Collaboration should be baked into the flow if a team or a community is involved, and I rarely see that they aren't involved. We just often don't recognize that. Give space for those people to connect, to be human in the space of the system. Observe first when applying a system as well. This is often something when someone has a new team or they want to change something, they don't realize what was there before. You need to move into that listening space before you make any change. When you're designing systems for communities, you're not just designing the interfaces, you're creating social interactions at scale. And the only constant is change, so your systems better be designed for it. WordPress is still innovating because of the built adaptation into the DNA of the system. A common and essential feature in open source systems for adaptive needs to be this architecture for flexibility. When considering, for example, the block editor, there's a problem. How do you adapt years of established workflows without breaking everything? Well, the answer is extensibility. That's where it comes down to with code and with product, and also with systems that involve humans as well. The AI team is taking the same approach by building blocks. The tool becomes invisible. The enhanced capability becomes permanent. And complexity, if we're real, is inevitable. Mainly because we're humans, but also it's inevitable. But confusion is actually optional. The art of system design is revealing complexity progressively, so users never feel overwhelmed, but never hit artificial limits. The human brain, we're adorable, but we can only hold a finite number of information in working memory. And one aspect of bringing in friction as a feature is we can layer up this complexity. And good systems, they don't eliminate all friction, they place it strategically. Because friction in the right places creates quality, prevents errors, and builds user confidence. There's actually a name for this, and it's called desirable difficulties. It gives you challenges that slow down in the moment, but actually improve long-term outcomes. So the moment your system starts dictating instead of overpowering, I'm unfortunately going to tell you that you've actually lost the plot. It's done. Your system is done for. People are not just going to disengage, but also over time, the system is going to become stagnant. It's going to become something that people lose interest with. It's going to wither. It will stop being useful, and that's the biggest downfall of any system. If you do one thing, create any system, big or small, that enables. If it's easier not to use a system, humans are like that, nobody's going to use it. Enabling also involves documentation, making sure it's logged for the future. So, that is scale. And it's a possible framework for today, but it's a start, hopefully, for a conversation that I'm going to continue in the halls and continue with people. It's built on the shoulders, though, of the people of the past and the theories of the past that each of us have. That maybe gives some hints at how you can start to use in creating your systems, big or large. But there's some complexities to consider. This fundamental shift in thinking about systems isn't technical. It's actually cognitive. And instead of asking, how do I solve this problem? I would suggest we need to start thinking, how do I build a system that prevents this class of problems? This mindset shift is a fundamental change in how your brain processes problems. Moving beyond is going into a space where you anticipate problems through analysis, you solve classes of problems through design, you focus on the long term, and you measure success by problems prevented. But today, as I mentioned, the world is exciting, and I think most of us have got this buzz of making and also confusion, probably. But I want to take a little bit of time to look at how this impact of this world that we're making in, and the word that seems to be on every stage that people are mentioning, AI. And if, for me, it would be tea, we're having a tea drinking game, we would all be really full of tea at this point with that word. The reality is, and I'm sorry to say this, AI isn't magic. It is at its core pattern recognition at scale. The better your systematic process, the better your AI outcomes. That's quite simply it. AI amplifies whatever systematic approach you give it. So this, to me, is the next evolution. And that kind of the AI plus human can sound a little bit hyper and inflated. But AI provides an extra layer of empowerment that we can't dismiss when applied to a systematic approach. And I hear a lot of people asking whether AI is going to replace humans, but to me, personally, that's kind of the wrong question. And for me, the right question is, how do we systematically integrate AI to amplify human creativity whilst preserving human agency? That, to me, is what we should be asking. Because AI is that pattern recognition technology, and it finds patterns in data and applies those patterns to new situations. But if your underlying processes are not systematic, AI will systematically amplify your inconsistencies and inefficiencies. But if your processes are systematic, AI becomes a systematic intelligence multiplier. Put good in, get good out. That's quite simply it. An MCP is actually just one tool in this kit. Through this organized approach, and others are going to come, we're hearing all this language and lots of different things are coming. The reality is these are systems and organized approaches that mean we don't have to do things over and over again or build custom integrations. They're refinements that help us to not have to do it. They're processes. It's simply a protocol, but it's an important part of the system thinking. And ultimately, where I personally think, and this is totally my thinking, we should be heading in this path, is that human paired in the AI system. And I say my thinking. I think a lot of people are there. The traditional model saw a flow from human to tool to output. This is where AI becomes part of that systematic thinking process, not a replacement for it. These tools are going to work across boundaries to empower humans. And AI is exceptionally good at pattern recognition across large data sets, something that actually overwhelms us as humans because of that working memory. We are incredible, we are amazing, but we are fallible. Humans are exceptionally good at contextual judgment, emotionally intelligence, and creative problem solving, because humans and AI pair perfectly. Some of the benefits where AI can actually take the strain involve handling systematic data processing, because then humans can focus on creative and strategic decisions. They can take expert-level systematic analysis accessible to non-experts and kind of amplify all that knowledge for us and give us access to it. They can also identify human cognitive biases and decision-making patterns. And they can identify which human decisions lead to the best outcomes. This sounds amazing and incredible, but we also need to be cautious about it. Remember the cautiousness of relying on systems. Because we need trust in this, and we need to get feedback about accuracy. We need that to know and develop those trust levels. And this is something all too missing in a lot of products that are coming out. They're not working on that building trust. They're giving it a cute logo and expecting to do a shortcut to trust. AI systems should enhance human decision-making without removing human control. It's really, really important long-term for humans to be in control. We have seen that. That's just our nature. Whether we like it or not, we have to admit that trust, agency, and transparency are built into our DNA as a human. And we need an understanding of how AI is going to arrive at these suggestions. We are curious to our core, and that is a beautiful thing. So by understanding how things are made and are built, that helps us. And it builds up with that trust. And once we get there, there's that combination. And we can have that expertise. And it's not creating dependency, it's working in unison. So open source taught me to value these distributed systems and this ownership of the powerful system through that. To understand what it means and learn about that in my own work. That's the template for the future I believe we all need to follow when we build systems. And that is why community is also part of any framework I personally feel we should move forward with. And distributed, to me, needs calling out separately. The idea of open source and its functioning in this way are key. Here are some lessons from this thinking as well that I think we need to take forward as we're moving into these interesting and new spaces. And for me, I personally find them quite interesting. Your system should work well with others, not just with the organization. It should have community-driven evolution. The best systematic improvements come from actual users, not internal teams. And proprietary systems create short-term advantage. Open systems create long-term value. Systems that belong to everyone are, by their kind of just being, also maintained by everyone. So if we scale right back to the thinking of design systems, the first generation of design systems gave us visual consistency. The next generation will give us behavioral consistency, systems that adapt to user contexts while maintaining systematic coherence. This should be true for all systems. I would encourage you to not just focus on the style, the flourish, the shiny, the sparkles. What is the actual impact and behavior needed to be consistent? How does this become part of the practice of an organization, beyond just something people follow, just because? AI only amplifies systematic thinking if you already have systematic thinking to amplify. If your processes are chaotic, AI simply systematically amplifies chaos. And I think we've all seen that sometimes. If your data collection is inconsistent, AI learns inconsistency. If your feedback loops are broken, AI perpetuates that breakage. The systematic foundation has to come first. Everything comes from the planning, the foundation. Only then can there be room for the happy accidents. Remember that, giving space for improvisation. And you do need that as well. We need that exploration in this time where everything's so exciting. We need space for those. And once we have that, we can then go with the flow, which is where that true excitement comes with technology. So the question isn't whether you will use system thinking, because you actually are just by being human. I'm sorry to tell you that. Every decision you make is already part of a system as well. Bit of a thing to tell you in the morning. The only choice is whether the system serves your goals or works against them. When you're tracking decisions, also notice the psychological context. Are you making different types of decisions when you're tired versus energized? How are you feeling about those decisions? Are there emotional patterns that influence your systematic thinking? Take that into when you're making things as well. When I was younger, I thought being smart meant having the right answer. I think we all did. But I learned over time that it was about asking the right question. Now, thanks to all the experiences I've had, I see that the real intelligence is about building the perfect system and combining that with yourself and others. A system that can keep spitting out correct answers to questions we haven't even thought of yet. Being intentional, measured, and using systems is something that I come back to over time and again. It is my rock, and I hope in this talk I've shared how you can take advantage of some of that today. You're already doing this because humans naturally do. The point is to recognize where you do it and amplify where you can do more. To embrace being a systematic thinker, not shy away from it. We're at an inflection point where AI and whatever's going to come, because we can't predict it. And if anyone says they can predict it, they are completely wrong. It can amplify systematic thinking in ways we've never seen before. AI doesn't replace the need for systematic thinking. It makes it even more essential. It makes us even more essential. The people who learn to think systematically with AI assistance will have an advantage over those who use it as a replacement for thinking. Because it doesn't just benefit from that thinking, it demands it. It craves it, it needs it, and it needs it done not in a chaotic way. We think in systems because we are human, and by treating systems as a core tool, a foundation principle to all our work, no matter what discipline, we begin to unlock that part of us that makes sense and that technology around us fits so well. It allows us to not only build the resilient technology systems from design and beyond, but it allows us to work in a strategic level with ease. It clears up that ambiguity, it allows us to have clarity, and it allows us to excel at the jobs that we do, and it allows us to see others and recognize that excelling. It leaves more room, not less, for creativity, which is incredible, and this scales. We've seen that happen. We've seen those systems that click and that work. This arguably is the only way, I would say, that you can scale this and not burn out humans at the heart of work. Because they are the advantage, and combined with AI can unlock that to be a significant advantage, no matter what the size of company you're running. Could even be just yourself. But, and I'm going to repeat it again, AI isn't magic. We need to kind of remember that and hold on to that for ourselves. It won't solve a broken system. I'm sorry to tell you that. It's not going to solve all your problems. It's probably going to make them worse if you don't try and fix them first of all. Systems will be your success, but in order to do that, you need to start using that type of thinking and start small. Don't just try and run because you're going to fall over. The question is today, where are you overcomplicating? Where can you refine? Where can you remove? Where do you need to apply the system thinking to your systems to get back on track? Your next big idea is waiting, not for inspiration, but for the right system to scale it. Not for the perfect moment, for the systematic thinking that turns any moment into the right moment. Not for permission, for the approach that makes permission irrelevant because the value is undeniable. Thank you.